Okay, we're back in session. Anyone who wants to stay and listen to the deliberations, you're most welcome. Have a seat. Anyone who wants to go, you're free to leave. But you're not free to stand around on the aisles right now. Okay. So now let's bring this item back for consideration and comments. The first comment we have is from John Ashbaugh, and then Andrew Carter, and then Dan Carpenter. So, Mr. Ashbaugh.
Well, a couple of questions came up from the audience that I wanted staff to address, and I'll reserve my comments until later. And I think we all are going to need a little back and forth. So we'll see how this little chime-in system here works. But these questions are for staff, but they're from the audience. In the first case, Mr. Gray, I believe, from Grace Church, asked whether our estimates of revenues considered, or are they indeed based on current use patterns, or did you adjust them a little bit to account for the possibility, the kind of elasticity of demand that people who now park free won't park as often or as long if they're charged for it?
The key word here is estimates. We based it on the Monday through Saturday use. And then we did discount it a bit for activity starting a little bit later. But it's a very difficult calculation where we base it on the structures. For example, we have to eliminate the first hour free, even though we open at, let's say, 11 o'clock. No one's being charged until 12. But they are estimates. They're based on patterns that we saw on Saturday, but based also on the Monday through Saturday use over time.
And as to the estimate of cost, I believe it was Mr. Reese who asked the question, which I thought was a good one, maybe a good one, I don't know. But in your cost, you did, of course, I assume the full cost of the employees that we use to staff all of the functions for the parking department.
I tried to be conservative. I base it off of minimal staffing. For example, the booth attendants that work, they're part-timers. And also, they are attributed to the structures. And for the enforcement, we have a part-time officer that works primarily Friday and Saturdays. I extended that person to Sundays, and there is no additional cost, if you will, for supervision and management. We're hoping to, as the report said, try to do it with the current levels we have and monitor it as it goes forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Andrew Carter.
Okie doke. I sort of wanted to give some framing comments as well. Probably the first one is that we'd all like parking to be free. But the fact of the matter, it isn't free. It does cost the city something to provide it. I think it's important to note that the parking fund is an enterprise fund. So the money that is gotten from the meters, from the structures, even the parking fines, at least the money that we get to keep, it doesn't go to the state, doesn't go into the general fund. It's not used to pay for police or the parks or whatever. It's used entirely for parking operations. The majority of those employees, as Robert mentioned, are part-timers and not full-time. We only have a couple full-time in parking. And the primary use of the money, to be honest, is to pay for the garages. Because the reality of the matter is the garages don't pay for themselves. Basically, the fees in the garages essentially cover the operating costs, but the rest of the fund has to fund the building of the garages. And the interesting thing in this town is that the parking garages are really a function of our downtown concept plan. They're almost enshrined in our general plan. And this dates back to before I was in town, so it would be the early 90s or what have you, that our goal was to, and we've been doing it over time with the Court Street lot, which is now shopping with Chinatown, with Garden Street, that we want to develop the downtown and then build structures on the outside of the core area. Now, as Robert mentioned, I was the council designee on a special task force which met with respect to funding the Napomo Street garage. And one of the things that we did in that assumption was that our rates would go up over time with inflation. So we built in basically that rates would increase 10% every 3 years to allow about a 3% inflation rate. Because obviously our other costs, be it personnel costs or when we do buy build garages. Construction costs go up over time. We have already, as Robert said, postponed rate increases in the interim because of the economy. So there are two different issues before us tonight, and they really are kind of two separate issues. The first is Sunday parking, and the other is the Supercore. And the Sunday parking is purely a revenue issue. And the real issue is not whether we as citizens, we as businessmen, whomever, those of us who use the downtown, is not whether we're going to pay for parking, it's really how we're going to pay for parking. And traditionally, we have not charged on Sunday, and the revenue we get the other 6 days of the week basically has to fund our operations. So the goal I have had is, to me at least, it would make more sense to charge for parking on Sundays than to increase our meter rates the rest of the week. That's really what if I don't start charging on Sunday, then I have to reach a point where I'm going to have to increase the meter rates, and particularly the garage rates, during the rest of the week. I don't want to do that. So I'm in support of charging parking on Sunday. I don't think we should start charging at 11. Before the testimony tonight, I felt that 12 o'clock noon would be more appropriate, particularly since people can still park in the garage and it's free until 1. If people want to entertain a 1 o'clock start time, I'd be fine with that. But I fundamentally believe, having sat on that task force and was it Pierre? Whoever said that they were a parking wonk? Yeah, that's Pierre. I'm one as well. And so it's really, how do we fund the garage? And no, we're not about to build the garage, the Nepoma Street garage, tomorrow. But once Chinatown takes off, we're going to need that garage. And so because of the time it takes to acquire property, and then the time it takes to design a garage, and the time it takes to build, we've got to establish a long-range game plan, and former Mayor Romero talked about that. So I wholeheartedly believe that we should charge for parking on Sunday, and to me it's just a question of at what time should we start. Now, the issue with the Supercore is really a separate issue, and it's primarily a demand management issue, as was pointed out. And I've always believed, I recognize that I'm not a businessman downtown, but you hear the complaint from people, I can't find a place to park. And what I'm trying to do is give people a place to park. It's a pure economic situation. You've got a finite demand of parking. And so if you really want to be parking right in front of the store, my goal is to raise the rate so there'll be spaces open. Incidentally, a side benefit of that, because here in San Luis, if you have a handicap placard, you can park anywhere. I mean, we get complaints, we don't have handicap spaces downtown. The reason we don't, quite frankly, and I went into this in private discussions, is that the ADA regulations basically make it impossible, not literally, but very difficult for us to provide a handicapped, legal, authorized handicap space downtown because of the ramps you need and the extra space and all of this. But one of the advantages of raising the rate in the Supercore is it'll be more likely that there'll be available spaces for those who just want to run in and run out, and there are times that I would just like to run in and run out and don't want to have to go up to a garage even if it's free because of walk, and it'll also help the seniors and the elderly. So I support the Supercore. Now, me personally, I would charge more than $1.50. I would charge $1.75 an hour. I don't think, to me, staff sort of, I don't know what the direction the entire council gave, and they talked about looking at the difference between the structures and the core meters. I was just simply trying to capture the price of that, the cost of that convenience. So that's sort of where I'm supporting both things. I would pick a later time on Sunday. I would actually pick a higher rate for the core. I would sort of, I'm a little reluctant to go out of the box with 400 meters. I just like to test something. Me personally, I would make some changes to the map that was presented. I in particular wouldn't put lots 3 and lots 11 in the Supercore. I think my concept of the Supercore is it's really primarily the street parking except maybe for the Garden Street lot or what have you. So I think John said there may be some give and take. That sort of is my overall, and then we can do the give and take later. Yep.
Okay. The next person is Mr. Ashbaugh, and then Kathy Smith. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan Carpenter. Dan Carpenter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to give a little historical aspect to this because I think it helps explain where we got to where we are today. As Steve mentioned, some of us have been around here a long time, and that doesn't mean a whole lot, except that we do have that memory. And I can remember not only walking downtown back in the 60s, 70s, where there was no parking problem on Sundays because no businesses were open on Sunday. In fact, in our own family business, we fought it to the very end, opening Sundays. We were probably one of the last to do it in the late 70s, early 80s. And we did it because the customer demand was there, and people's buying habits change since people buy 24/7 online. So as their buying habits have changed, businesses have opened up, stayed open longer, and I think it's significant that the Downtown Association is supporting the meters being used on Sunday, because they're the ones that have the real risk, the businesses that are located downtown. There's a risk and a reward. They risk people saying, no, I'm not going to pay the meters and I'm going to shop somewhere else. And the reward is, of course, that they do turn the spaces. And that's why the meters were put in downtown 50 or 60 years ago, was to turn spaces. It was not a money maker. In fact, the first ones they charged, it was a penny for 6 minutes. So you could actually use up your pennies, 10 pennies an hour. It was just to pay for the meters and to pay for the meter maids. Then we started raising the rates to pay for surface lots, because that was the next direction that we had. And now we're getting rid of surface lots and we're doing structures. So, our buying habits change, our parking habits change, and I think we need to change with that time. And if the Downtown Association is willing to take that risk, maybe they know a little bit more about the shopper than we do. So I'm willing to support it on Sunday. I would agree with Andrew and some of the speakers. I think a later start is better, at least a 1 o'clock start, maybe 1 to 6. I'm in favor of that. I really do like the new meters, and I would support all 400 of them. I think when it comes to swiping, that's where we're headed today. And I, for one, don't carry cash or change in my pocket, and it would make it a whole lot easier, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And that convenience, can mean a lot if somebody's making a decision to park downtown. I can just swipe my card, and I can park. Very convenient. And there's a price to pay for that parking, and each of us who do, I can go back to the 60s when Madonna Plaza was being built, and people were afraid that because people had to pay meters downtown, that all the business was going to go to Madonna Plaza. It just didn't happen. There is a reason people shop downtown. It's very unique. They're going to continue to. I think as long as we're reasonable in the fees we charge, I can go either way on raising the rates. I'm fine with it. I don't think it makes that much difference, a quarter an hour, to be honest with you. The issue I have, I guess, and I brought it up earlier, is let's spread the cost out. There's a difference between our daytime businesses and our nighttime businesses. And I think it's unfair that our daytime businesses, their customers have to feed the meters, and our late night businesses don't. Their customers don't have to. And I'm talking about that 12, 1, 2 in the morning. That's an unfair advantage if I have a night business as opposed to a day business. I think it should be spread out completely. And I, for one, would like to see that included, and maybe that comes back at a later time, what the financial impact would be of adding those meters late at night. That may not necessitate an increase during the day. So that's kind of my thoughts thus far, and that's where I'd like to go.
Thank you. Mr. Ashbaugh.
Well, it looks as though if I'm taking my notes right, I may be building a majority for, and I think there may be full consensus on the part of the council about these recommendations. It's around the edges that I think we're going to be needing to deliberate some, but it is important we take a couple of minutes to realize what this issue is not about. It is not about the siting or the planning process for the new parking garage. That ship has sailed, folks. I myself would have preferred, along with some of the speakers here, that we locate it more on the Marsh Street corridor, but we would have had to condemn property to do that. And this city needs to move faster than that. It would take us a decade or more to get the property we need for that garage site. It's going to take us long enough to build the garage we're now envisioning at Monterey and Napomo. And that site will, in fact, reserve part of it, the frontage on Monterey Street, as I understand it, for a theater. And that part of the purpose for that parking structure will be to reinforce not just the commercial function of the downtown, but its cultural context as well. That's something that Ken Schwartz keeps reminding us about. It's been suggested that this is also some secret conspiracy to strangle the downtown. I can assure you there is no such secret committee. This downtown is not a ghost town. I, too, am concerned about loss of museums, more concerned about the loss of Novel Experience, my favorite bookstore. But downtown is thriving, folks. Downtown's rental rates, I think Steve Del Martini could verify, are holding up very well. When there are vacancies, as there always are, they usually get filled up pretty quickly. And usually with entrepreneurs who know how to orient their business to the patrons that they're going to find in the downtown. We always need to be aware and I think really help reinforce the good mix of businesses that we have downtown. And we're doing our best to do that with the decision that we made just 3 weeks ago to move forward, not quite as fast, but we are going to move forward with the downtown physical improvements that I'm quite excited about seeing those. It's not going to happen right away, but it will happen, I'm sure. This also is not a decision about Proposition 13 or Measure Y. This is a decision about, frankly, the parking fund and all of the revenues that we're talking about drawing from these changes are going to be dedicated to the parking fund. It is for that purpose that we are setting aside monies to build the new garage at Monterey and Napomo. Parking meters also do perform an important function. Dan, as Councilman Carpenter has referenced that. That's to manage the scarce resource that we have in street parking. And frankly, that was the reason, as you reminded us, they were put in back as early as 1960, I believe. The first parking meters went downtown. I confirmed today, in fact, in a conversation with an owner of a jewelry store on Garden Street, well, we've all had an email from him, Mr. Richard Stevens, that he would, in fact, very likely open now on Sundays if parking is metered on the streets there. That's a factor, one of many, but it is a factor that may lead him to actually open on Sundays, just as Dan's family made that decision years ago with their downtown business. So it's our responsibility as a council to manage that resource. And frankly, guys, we've been coasting for a while on deferring this tough decision. We need to bite the bullet, and I think by the way, I'm counting votes. I'm going to cast my vote in favor of Sunday parking. I would prefer an even later start time. I've heard noon. I've heard 1 o'clock. I'm going to go for 2 o'clock myself, but we'll work that out. I'd also like to keep the idea in mind of maintaining free parking in the garages and in the 10-hour meters. I note from this schedule that's up here, frankly, less than 15% of the revenue under any scenario is derived from charging for the parking in the garages. As a occasional worshiper at Old Mission Church, I know that's where we prefer to park. It's right across the street. As to the SuperCore charges, I think the rate increase is thoroughly justified, particularly in light of the fact that we're going to be putting these new parking meters that are going to be so cool with the credit cards. I think the November 1st date is a good one to shoot for. The whole conversation, Dan, that you introduced about maybe extending the hours from 6 o'clock into the evenings, well, let's defer that one for a while. That wasn't a part of staff's direction. That's not something before us right now. I'm open to it, but not tonight. We got a lot more work to do just on the issues we've got to deal with now. So I think we're beginning to see a consensus develop here. I look forward to hearing what my colleagues say. Thanks.
Good. Okay, Kathy Smith.
Okay, well, I'd like to start out just a little bit talking about the culture of our community. It's really exciting to be a city council member in this community because of the number of people who care about what we do, and they really know what they're talking about when they go to the podium to speak with us. And that makes it easier for us to make up our minds because we know how you feel. Now, tonight we clearly have heard the majority of people opposed to Sunday parking. And we have to keep that in mind as we approach our decision-making process. One of the things we treasure in this community is our quality of life, and part of that quality of life is our downtown. Our downtown, at one time anyway, was filled with businesses that were locally owned. We don't have too many of those anymore. I used to own the Garden Street Inn, which is right next to downtown, and I'm very familiar with all of the parking issues that came up. The city was very, very cooperative and assisted us in having overnight parking for our guests. This was many years ago, and we paid a fee for that. So the city's always been very cooperative with people who have special problems of parking, and I recognize that, and I think we need to make sure that we're able to support our services and do it in a way that makes us all proud of being from the happiest city and still caring about each other. I am going to be supporting Sundays, paid parking on Sundays. I would like to see us start at 1 o'clock. I used to go to the Mission, or have gone to the Mission, go every now and then. And even for the 2:40 or 12:45 Mass, a person could go into the parking garage for an hour and park and not have to pay. So I think that pretty much covers the Mission, and I think some of the others would be happy with a 1 o'clock start on that. And in the Supercore, I really do think it's important to keep the customers turning over. I think the credit card is dynamite. I think people are going to be really excited about having that. Customer service, that's part of what we offer in San Luis Obispo, and hopefully with a smile. And also, but I am not real interested in the lots. Some of those lots are going to be replaced by Chinatown. They're going to be replaced by the Garden Street terraces. I see no reason to include those. I would prefer to see the Supercore on the streets, and I don't know how many meters that would be, but I think that would be more appropriate than having them in the lots, because those would have to be replaced anyway. But I think it's important that we understand that the city is having financial difficulties, and we're not going to come out of this quickly. When Chinatown and Garden Street terraces come in, we are losing parking. We need that parking garage. So I really think we need to bite the bullet and do things that have been deferred at least 2 other times. And I thank Dave Romero for... Is he still here? No, he's not here. I thank him for being one of those who is supporting the change, even though when he was sitting up here, I guess he did not. But I think that we need to move in that direction, and I think we'll all be happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would like to thank former Mayor Dave Romero and also Councilmember Carter, and actually everyone who spoke in terms of framing this issue. I had all kinds of things that I wanted to say to frame the issue, and everybody's already said it, so I feel like it's out there. I have wanted to go ahead and charge on Sundays for parking for quite a while, and it's because the downtown commercial core is so lively on Sundays. And I agree that a 1 p.m. time to start would make sense, so that the mornings are we're still not charging for the mornings. People could park in the structures and wouldn't be charged then until 2 p.m. So I think that would be a good choice. I would be in favor of actually extending the time to 8 p.m. so that it would be 1 to 8 p.m. That would still give us our 7 hours that staff calculated, and that would include it wouldn't get the late night bar traffic, but it would get a whole lot of the restaurant traffic and the I think we have a lot of visitors and students eating in those restaurants on Sunday evenings. I'm also in favor of the new meters, all 400 of them. I think it makes sense to raise the rates 25 cents in order to encourage more turnover in the what's being called the super core. And I have to tease Robert. I said, no, first you're a champion and now you want to be a superhero. So I don't know if it has to be a super core, if it could be an inner core or just a core. I think maybe we'll find another name. So the question of the garages, not charging in the garages, I think it makes sense to raise the garage fee, but still maintain the differential that we're talking about. So to encourage people parking in the garage. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. I wonder, in terms of dealing with all these issues, if maybe we could just start with a staff recommendation and see if we can get a vote on that.
I was going to suggest, I'm next up
Yes.
on the speaking. I was going to
yes.
suggest it maybe if we sort of did a series of straw polls.
Yes, straw polls.
And
Okay.
I would recommend that we start with Sunday, since we've talked about that the most, and I think we're pretty much we've got support for 1 o'clock, and then we could go into we do have the tangential issue. I think someone suggested not charging them, and then go into the super core. So just to try to soften I would a straw poll. I think there's support for Sundays starting at 1 o'clock. So that would be sort of the first thing as a straw poll I might recommend.
Okay, well,
But
that would mean just people saying whether or not they support
Well,
that.
and then we can craft it at the end based
Okay.
on the straw poll, comprehensive.
Okay, well, that's essentially the same as going
Okay.
through the staff recommendation. So do you want to start then?
May I?
I mean, it
Right.
sounds to
Well,
me
what-
like
okay.
everyone so far has supported 1 o'clock on
Right.
Sunday. So is there anyone who doesn't support that?
No, I support 1 o'clock. I do think it's important. I think we should charge for everything. I think people sort of expect throughout the week, the times may change, but I think what would happen if you suddenly don't charge in the structures, it could change things very dramatically. I can tell you, I always go to the structures because I always know there's a place, and I always know it'll be an hour free. I'd hate suddenly that because the garages are always free, then I drive to the garages and there's no longer a space there. So I would
Well,
sort
you
of
have a
just
point
keep the thing.
You do have
Okay.
a point there.
So if we can just, right now,
Point of information.
it's, yes.
I know you referenced a moment ago, as if it were an issue before us, about increasing rates in the structures. That's actually not something we're deciding tonight. That is automatically going to happen unless we take action
Right.
between now and July 1st.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
So just in terms of starting at 1 o'clock, and then it looks like we're all in support of that.
I actually have a minor objection, and I just
Okay.
want to voice it, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
It's incidental to our deliberations, I know, but the reality is that there's a 12:45 mass at the mission, and it happens to be the Spanish-speaking mass too, and that's why I advocated the 2 p.m. start. But if the rest of the council wants 1 o'clock, I'm perfectly willing to go along with that. That was my major objection, and it was after specific conversation with representatives from Old Mission
Okay.
that I preferred 2 o'clock.
Well, if I can be allowed to speak, John, the parking garage is very close to the mission, and they can go in the parking garage for an hour.
And so it would be effectively
yeah, they
2
would
o'clock.
still have free parking.
Okay, so when are we talking about it ending on Sunday? If it starts at 1 o'clock, are we talking about extending it beyond 6 p.m.?
Well, in that,
I had suggested that we go to 8.
Makes no sense to go to 8 on just Sunday night.
Okay.
That would probably want to be the least impacted evening of the
And-
week. I would think if you're going to go later, I would extend it throughout the week.
and again, I made the point that a decision that would be in any respect extending the hours, even on Sunday, it seems to me should be one that we take up separately and later. Staff has not had a chance to assess that. Impacts
Okay.
on our staffing and so forth would be too complex to really wrestle with right now. So I think 6 o'clock is later. I'd be willing to go on Sunday or any other day of the.
Okay,
For
so
now.
so starting at 1 and ending at 6 p.m. Is there anyone who is against that? Okay, so
Reservations noted.
okay, so I'm going to ask that we keep using our buttons because it's really helpful. It helps me, and I think it's helping everybody. Okay, then on the next issue, which is the Supercore issue. In other words, increasing the on-street parking meter from 125 to 150 an hour in a new downtown inner core or supercore. Let's just hear. I've got John Ashbaugh as the first speaker.
No, actually, it's somebody else.
Oh.
Andrew.
Oh, but Andrew, you're switching buttons on me.
Oh, I'm
Okay. I didn't know. You're number 2. Okay, Andrew. Andrew Carter, go ahead and speak.
No, I'm number 1.
Yes,
The
go
numbers
ahead.
guy, right?
You're taking up 2 buttons, and that's all right.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I've covered up
That's
that
okay.
button. I'm not sure.
All right.
As I suggested, I personally believe that I would suggest that it be $1.75. That we basically it'd have 75 cents per hour in the meters in the garages, in the 10 hour, $1.25 in the normal 2 hour, and then $1.75 in the Supercore. So I would suggest $1.75 for 2 hours. Otherwise, if it was going to be $1.50, I would suggest that you reduce the Supercore to an hour, and that would really get the turnover going.
Okay.
Point of information.
Yes.
I would ask staff, is it possible that we could actually add a credit card fee to any credit card transactions? Is that,
They charge.
I know we are going to be charged 14 cents per credit card transaction, correct?
You would want to build that into your rate that the person's paying that goes to us to cover that cost.
Okay.
So another question then, would the 400 meters essentially be placed in the Supercore?
That was what our map showed. That would be in that
Okay,
in that
so-
areas.
So if we did go to 175, that would include the extra costs that are involved with using the credit card.
We would have to recalculate it, and
Yes.
and it would better cover that than $1.50, of course.
Okay.
Well, let me just voice my.
Yes,
if I
Mr.
still have
Ashbaugh.
the weighing in on the issue of the rate increase, I would only be in favor of the $1.50 rate increase, but I do think it's important that we charge it at all the meters in this blue area as shown here. That is not the full 400 meters. We're going to replace all 400 meters, as I understand, throughout the downtown. You're shaking. Okay, so let's make sure we understand how many meters are involved in just the blue area, which does include most of the
Approximately
business.
400 in that blue area right now.
Oh, okay, that is the 400.
Including
So
the lots.
The 170 then was which meters? That would be some subset of, that would be a super core.
That is the areas of higher demand. It's basically the streets on Higuera and some of the cross streets, but would not include the lots,
Got it, okay.
Okay.
except
but-
for Lot 2, which was in the higher demand
Right.
area.
So right now, what we're talking about is the blue area on this map, 400 parking meters, and I wonder if anyone else would support the 175 besides Andrew Carter, and the next person is John Ashbaugh.
No, I actually can cancel mine now.
Okay.
I voiced my objections.
Okay,
for
fine.
Now we have
75.
Kathy Smith.
Okay, I really don't favor $1.75. The Downtown Association did not support the increase at all. So if we're going to have the super core, I love the credit cards, but I would rather go to $1.50, and I would rather leave the lots out, primarily because of hopefully that Copeland's and the Garden Street terraces won't be far behind, that they'll be into those areas anyway, and we will have, done a lot for not very much return. So I support $1.50 and would like to take the lots out.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from Dan Carpenter.
I think until I see an assessment at a later time, obviously not tonight, of the nighttime economy where we can actually go later, I'm not going to favor any increase. Leave the $1.25 as is until I see the revenue impact of adding it to the late evening, because that may generate far more income than we would going to $1.50 or $1.75. So I'm not prepared to make that decision now and then possibly go the other way later. So I would like to stick at the $1.25.
Okay. Andrew Carter.
Simply in response to Dan's question, I viewed, and maybe staff can agree or disagree, that, and I tried to do that in my framing, this super core issue is less about revenue. Yes, it does increase revenue, but the driving force behind it was turnover, to trying to get the spaces that are clearly in the highest demand because they're right in front of stores to turn over. So I'm not disagreeing with you about other things that we need to think about, and I was going to talk about that later. I don't think we personally should talk about other issues tonight, simply because we haven't noticed it, and I want to give people a fair thing. But the super core, to me at least, is more about turnover and convenience as opposed to revenue.
And you may be right, but I don't want to address that until I've seen the potential impact of revenues. Either way, you may be right.
And I guess I'm still on. I'm somewhat in Kathy's camp. I personally would have lots 2 and 4 be in the core, but I would not have lots 3 and 11 be in the core.
Actually, point of information. I'm next up, but.
Mr. Ashbaugh, yes.
Yeah. The actual staff recommendation is increase on-street parking meter rate. May I assume that the recommendation isn't restricted to the on-street, the curb parking, to go from $1.25 to $1.50? You are recommending, aren't you, to increase that within the super core area, including lots 3, 11, 2, and 4 in the Mars Street parking garage? Correct?
That's the recommendation that we have before you that involves the 400 meters.
And let me understand, though, Andrew's recommendation is that we remove from that lots 3 and 11 in the Chinatown, future Chinatown project area. Am I right, Andrew?
Right. It's somewhat along the lines of the other map that they didn't provide us in the packet, but they showed at a certain point in time tonight.
You're okay with all the street parking that's shown in the blue area, but you do.
Well, I could make some quibbles, but I'm going to try not to make quibbles tonight. So, but to me, I 3 and 11, I would.
I'm just wondering what your rationale is for excluding lots 3 and 11,
because
and,
they're
any
not
lots, any of the surface lots.
That's not the other. Where's the other map? You see, my interpretation from the two ones, even that, I wouldn't go as far as this. Just I was going around town today during the day. It's not even the busiest day of the week, but my view of the whole idea around the supercore originally, what I understood the direction we were giving, we were trying to get on the streets that are the most impacted. People want to be right near a store, to get those to turn over. The lots, at least lots 3 and 11, I think lots 2 and lots 4 are different because of their size and where they are. Certain people, they're parking there for a while. It's not that they're in generally, parking there and running, getting over at High Garra Street to run into the store and then running back.
Okay, so we have two people who are saying 150. No, we have, okay, two people who are saying leave out lots 3 and 11. Excuse me. And I believe we have 3 people saying raise the rate to 150. I'm personally in favor of that. So
No.
let's just.
No, I'm not
Okay, Dan is not in favor of 150.
raising any rates at this time.
Right. So you want it to stay at 125. So how many people would be willing to raise the rate to 150?
Okay, fine.
3. Okay, so we've got that. Then the next question is leaving out lots 3 and 11. And we have 2 people with that. I'd like to just hear a little more from Kathy Smith about the rationale for leaving out 3 and 11, because that would
Why don't you go back to the other
reduce
map?
the
This one's
number
too-
of
other map.
credit card meters considered.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but it's just because those areas, we would be going in and changing the top piece that would make them credit card areas. Maybe we want to do that anyway. But I just don't feel that those feel like core. They seem to me like areas that are far enough away from businesses that they aren't super core. I think of super core as those that are parked on the street right in front of the businesses. And that's my major reason. And I'm also thinking of Lot 2 then. Lot 2, 3, and 11.
Can I comment real quick? The
Okay,
objective
yes.
that we were given by council before is to have the higher rate differential between the structure rates and the meter rates, and that's why we expanded from the smaller map to this larger map to get us closer to the structures, and that's all I just wanted to explain that.
Proximity rather than dependence.
Right. Well, that also goes to the parking demand, parking management that Andrew Carter was referring to.
If I
So
may.
I personally am in favor of the staff recommendation as it was stated, to go to 150 an hour and keep those lots in.
I too.
Yes, Mr. Ashbaugh.
Well, and again, I think it's a matter of managing our resource. That's fundamentally what we're about. And frankly, those surface lots are hammered pretty heavily. They really are. They are, especially as you get closer to Monterey Street, or on lot number 2, next to Big Sky Restaurant. There's some attractors in each one of those lots that really do make them as attractive as street lots. So and frankly, I just think it would make the staff recommendation here for the blue area where we have these 400 meters just seems to make sense to me. I think we do have a consensus on what the new rate should be. I don't think that we should vary from the staff recommendation as to where it applies. I really do think the lots should be included. That's all.
I could
Okay.
move in that direction. I could. I mean,
Oh.
I'm already with you on
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
$1.50.
Okay.
that's what I was going to say.
Okay,
Just
so
to try to
I can move in that direction.
So we're talking about, so far there's a consensus on the staff recommendation as stated for number 2.
Mhm.
And did you want to say anything, Mr. Carpenter? No? Okay.
Excuse me, but I just noticed something about recommendation number 2, and that it does, those last few words there, keep structure rates at 75 cents an hour. That
Right.
does mean that we would not then implement the scheduled July 1 increase to $1.
Right.
Right.
I personally feel very strongly about that. As I said in my remarks, my
Okay.
my
I just
goal
wanna
is to try to
put them in the garages. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
raise the other rates, at least
Yeah.
in the
I
economy.
agree.
Okay.
That's good. I do too.
Let's leave that where it is.
Yeah, the point is to try to make the garages more attractive. And okay, so then on the third one about the 400 credit card meters,
That's a slam
Is-
dunk.
Yeah.
That's a slam
I
dunk as
think
far as I'm
everybody
concerned.
liked that.
It's makes all kinds of sense. I don't
Mhm.
know anybody that carries around enough change to feed the meters the way they need to be fed, and if we want them to, I think the customer service concept of that is just exactly what we want our community to be known for.
Okay. So,
Mayor Marks? Mayor Marks?
Yes, sir.
As it relates to recommendation, the end of recommendation number 2, when council sees the fund review in June, then what we'll do is we'll have that a formal recommendation that will defer that rate increase that's scheduled for July. So that will be the follow-up for us to bring back to you, essentially formalizing that as it relates to that action at the end of number 2.
Okay, so what I see that we have so far is the staff recommendation for number 1, except we're starting to charge at 1 p.m., ending at 6 on Sundays. On 2, it is as stated, and 3, it is as stated. Is that correct?
Right, I was going to make that motion. It's the staff recommendation with the only change being 1 o'clock start time on Sunday. So
No,
that's my
second
motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion at this
Yes.
point? Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, I will support the motion, but I definitely want to be on record that I do not support the rate increase at this time until I see an assessment of the nighttime economy.
Okay.
And I'd like to add to the record that while I support Dan's openness to the possibility of charging in evening rates, I think there's a larger conversation we need to have there, and that relates to the whole the hospitality zone concept as well. And that could be considered as part of that, along with parking and pedestrian improvements. We have to look at the whole ecology of the downtown. It has changed a lot, and I think you make a good point, but that's not kind of what is on our agenda. I do like especially, I was just very excited about these ideas. I think we ought to have a credit card operated meter for each of us so that we could put it in when we choose to speak. We make a lot of money.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, it passes 5-0.
Madam Mayor,
very
may
much.
I
Yes.
make a suggestion that we direct staff to look into the late night idea, going to 8 o'clock, and come back with us at some point with more ideas on that? I think
Well,
Mr. Carpenter's
I think that
comments
makes
are well
sense.
taken.
Yeah.
My vision was to look beyond 8 o'clock. Beyond 8 o'clock. My vision was to look into that late night economy that we have, and
So
No.
that was the intentions of my comments.
So perhaps a good time for that would be when you come back to us with the other recommendations?
Well, we certainly wouldn't have time to do that before we get to the fund review for this year, but we could include that as kind of lay out what strategy we think we would need to take to evaluate that fully and look at that over the course of this next year. I think it's a significant work effort. There's a lot to be considered, especially with the nighttime economy and the activity down there. It would sure be nice to have some time to really flesh that out.
Yeah. So I think that's just general council direction at when the timing works out for staff.
So my suggestion, if it's consistent with council consensus, is that we take that into consideration as we're putting together the work plan for the next 2-year financial plan for the transportation, for the parking operation. And you'll see that as part of the budget document that comes before you. So you'll have a sense of what the timing will be, and we'll flesh all those issues out so that you'll be able to see them.
Yeah. Does that sound okay?
Well,
Good. Thank you.
Are you using this now or not?
Well, at this moment, I'm not because but when we go to the next item, which is going to happen
Well, I still want to
really
talk about
soon.
this item.
Okay, go
because
ahead.
it's tangentially related to
Go
this,
ahead.
and Dan's raising a potentially big picture type of item. What I was going to suggest, we do have the parking fund review coming whenever it's coming. There are a bunch of other little issues that have been raised in the past that haven't done. What I was going to suggest is that, maybe so that we have a chance to discuss those or provide some direction to staff, that maybe each of us individually forward thoughts to them. Because I have more little picture items than that have come up in the past, or actually came up when I looked at this map that I'd like somehow to get on the agenda and provide direction to staff going forward.
Well, I think it makes sense that we email our thoughts to staff. I think that is always helpful to just give feedback. But now, in terms of the timing, would that work out in terms of your work program if we did it at the time of the parking review, parking fund review?
I think we'd like to know what those are before we get to
Yes.
that point. So if we
Okay.
got them in the by the end of the month, by the
Okay.
end of April, would that be sufficient time to take it into consideration, or do you need it
We could build it in the 2-year
right?
plan. My concern is the cost element, but also the outreach that we need to do
Right.
to get some feedback, and that does take some time.
Right, but the only thing that we're getting towards the end of the month is the list from each council member so that we can take that into consideration in the bigger picture of presenting a work plan for the next 2-year financial planning cycle.
Right, and that work plan could include a time for outreach. I mean, that could be built into the plan, yeah.
As part
With
of
the
that,
reminder that I'm still the downtown champion too,
Yes.
and I only want to bring that up
Okay.
because
So we'll-
one of the reasons, to be honest with you, that I didn't get this back sooner was because of some of the workload issues.
I did.
And I think some of those issues are addressed in the upcoming strategic budget direction.
Okay, so are
I
we?
wanted-
Yes,
I wanted
one
to
more
comment.
comment, and then we're going to go on to the
Yes.
next item.
Very briefly, I think, too, before Deb leaves, the meetings that are going to be held with stakeholders about this whole responsible hospitality zone and alcohol outlets and all of this that is funded by the ABC grant, I think possibly might include some discussion about this issue. I personally have a lot of reservations, frankly, about charging for evening parking. I think that part of what makes the downtown thrive in late afternoons right now is the fact that 6 o'clock the meters stop and go to dinner. You can spend a very nice evening in downtown. So I've got a lot of concerns about it. I'm
Well,
still going to give it fair
okay.
consideration, but I think that's a good place where we can
Yeah.
start is with that group that's meeting.
And then we can all email. Now, when we say to staff, should we be emailing to whom?
If you could send it to Jay, and then he'll make distribution of it appropriately.
Okay, so we should be emailing Jay by the end of the month our thoughts about parking outside of what we decided tonight. Okay, we're going on to item B.